So, okay, yesterday, let's go to this slide here. Yesterday we talked about the whole national regional consultation. Today we're going to deal with these last three steps of this strategic action programme process. One is implementing strategies, which we'll talk about in a minute. Secondly, it's then setting strategic actions and then drafting SAP. Okay? So in this section we're going to look at what are the key integration and implementation strategies and some examples from some different projects. So the first question I want to ask is why do we need an implementation strategy? Well, we need to ensure that SAP is fully integrated into national development plans and vice versa. It's not just a one-way street, it's a two-way street. Consequently, the SAP development process will require direct engagement with national development planning processes in each country. I think you understand that. There's no single way of doing this. It's not as if I can just say, Jeff has developed this, and I can drop this in and you can use it. Every project is going to be different. It's going to even be different between countries within projects. A number of approaches have been used over the last decade and tend to reflect the economic, political, and institutional and regulatory frameworks of the country where the integration is being carried out. And often the SAP will use more than one approach to ensure that it's fully integrated into both country and regional processes. So there might be some kind of national integration, and then there might also be some regional integration, for example, through some kind of commissioning. So, to give some examples of how this can happen, and this isn't just national plans, it's embedded into, no it is, this is an example of that. So one example, one approach is to embed it into existing national action plans. So each country is going to already have existing action plans. An example of that is Lake Victoria in Africa, where what they did, and I won't read this out, you've got it on your handouts, but what they've done there is, I will read it out. To ensure sustainability of the SAP activities, it may be necessary to mainstream them into national priorities and relevant regional initiatives. So mainstream will pave the way for respective institutions to eventually capture SAP activities in their annual budgets, especially for the purposes of leveraging external funding. So this is making sure that what is in SAP is mainstreamed into national plans. A very sensible way of doing it, I would say. Another approach is to set up strategic partnerships with other regional initiatives. And this is the Mekong River Basin. In order to reduce replication of effort, waste of resources, and conflict between approaches, the SAP processes can be fully collaborated and integrated with other strategic partnerships and national and regional initiatives. Examples could include engaging and collaborating with ongoing IWRM plans or ICZN plans, amongst others. So, for example, in this project, you could be doing this, embedding in existing national plans, but at the same time, making sure that it is also embedded and engaged and collaborates with existing plans that are on the ground. For example, I understand that there's an integrated coastal zone management plan being set up in Peru. So, for example, that's a very good place to make sure that there is good connection. Of course, there's then sub-regional and bilateral agreements. Countries could be encouraged to enter into sub-regional and bilateral agreements to address issues relating to the implementation of SAP. Again, that's something this project could do, I imagine. This will involve perhaps a memorandum of understanding signed by the participating countries, and then form an umbrella in which these sub-regional and bilateral agreements are negotiated and implemented. Another very, very practical way of doing it. Regional coordination networks. This is done by many projects. This is for Lake Chad, but this text is taken from Lake Chad, but it could just as equally apply to any of the LMEs that have done something similar. Often regional commissions are created, strengthened or revised as part of the SAP process, and are given the responsibility for promoting and coordinating the implementation of priority actions that the participating countries have defined in SAP. So it could be that you set up a brand new commission, and that could be one of the key actions in the SAP. So the SAP could have a whole set of actions around setting up the commission. And I know Jeff will be, Jeff is will be supportive of that. Probably more cleverly, certainly for this project, is to look at existing organisations that you could then strengthen and maybe give a commission title to, so that you're not just creating from scratch, which is very expensive, you're actually using what's already there. So this is a very pragmatic way of doing it. Another way is to develop for the project. So during the SAP process, both countries produce their own national action plans specifically for the water system concerned. So this is not the national action planning process of the country. This is developing national action plans for the Humboldt Current. So whilst the SAP process is going on, many of the actions that are in the developed in the SAP are going to be national rather than based on LME-wide ones, and you could then build them into separate national action plans. Yeah, this works in some projects. In the Caspian Sea, it worked very well. That's exactly what they did. Other projects did not work so well, and part of the problem is it does take a lot of time, because you're actually then creating 3 action plans, creating a strategic action program, and then, in this case, 2 action plans as well to go with it. So it can be quite time-consuming. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on that. This is, somewhat in the distance now. We're talking about, maybe at least a year to 18 months in the future here for this. So certainly a year before it's going to be considered in any great detail, I imagine. But are there any questions on that? Was that all fairly straightforward? Mike?
It was just a question if you have any examples of national action plans, because I would imagine that maybe there would be a national action plan for seamounts or sea canyons, and that would be, it's applicable along the length of the current, but it's also applicable in the country context. And our project document does talk about national action plans in the text, so it is an important element. I just wondered if you perhaps could elaborate a little bit further.
Yes, certainly. I don't think there'll be unless someone did a trawl through all the SAPs for LMEs to find that specific example around seamounts. But I'm sure there are national action plans that have been developed for LMEs, in which case it's a matter of just finding them, seeing how they did it, maybe contacting, if it's a more recent project, contacting the project manager and having that conversation. How did they do it, what's the process, and then looking at the national action plans and seeing, this is part of that, being clever about this, is let's not reinvent the wheel. You don't need to. If there's a good example out there, take it and replicate it. And in essence, it's the same for the strategic action program. If there's a good example out there in terms of layout, shall we say, don't go and make your own one up. Use that and modify it. But so that would be my advice.
Con respecto a este tema, eso de que, por ejemplo, el plan nacional de manejo integrado de la CPS podría realmente ayudarnos un poco con este plan de acción. Por otro lado, tenemos nosotros también que retener en cuenta el plan de acción de la conservación de la biodiversidad, que también nos va a ayudar a este plan de acción. ¿Las planes así?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so that's that step of it. Let's move on. Okay, so moving on from that, what we're going to do now is we're now into this next step, which is setting strategic actions. And this is all about action planning, setting actions, timescale, priorities, and indicators. So, in this section, we're going to learn about, I'll give you some more information about what is an action plan, what does action planning mean in terms of the SAP, and some key action planning steps. So, what we've done up to now is develop probably quite a large body of information. It's not going to be in a form yet that could be considered to be a strategic action programme. We've got all the pieces, or many of the pieces, and we've hopefully got some political acceptance of that through this consultation process, national consultation process. We've also identified how we're going to integrate the SAP process into national processes. But that isn't in its, in what we've got so far, a strategic action programme. It's just quite a lot of the pieces. Essentially then, an action plan or an action programme is a framework of objective actions for achieving strategy goals. So it should state clearly how each action contributes to one or more given objective and may suggest a relative rating, either medium or low, some kind of priority. So here then we're actually one of the core outcomes when drafting SAP is to develop it in a way that's easily translatable into action. This is what this is all about. It needs to be able, somebody needs to be able to pick it up and say, yes, this is what we do first, this is what we do second, this needs to be done before this needs to be done. The SAP should not only address the high-level initiatives and overarching goals, but that they also get articulated into short-term actions that will be required to achieve the programme. And we'll come back to that in a moment. This idea that we've got overarching goals, a set of possible objectives, and then a series of actions to meet those objectives. Bearing in mind that we have language difficulties here around those terms. Key to this step is the translation of the agreed options and alternatives into objectives and actions. So you've got all the information, it's now just a matter of making sure that these options and alternatives become the objectives and the maybe smaller time-scaled actions. And this step will be careful management by the project management